Hello and welcome to Gaia. In this tutorial, I'll take you through some advanced mask creation techniques. These techniques are very powerful because they give you fine-grained control over where you're going to apply other effects and techniques to your terrain. So in the example in front of us, what I've done is I've actually created a mask that is for flat, low areas of the terrain. So essentially what we're masking is this part of the terrain, and why that's valuable is then we can apply effects just to that part of the terrain. So let me give you a quick demonstration. So I'll just bring up my terrain utilities and we'll go to quantize. What I'm going to do is set my quantize height to say 50 meters, and I'm going to use this mask. So this mask applies where that effect will be applied to the terrain. So let's look at it. Cool. So what we've done is we've applied this mask only to the lower parts of the terrain. So you can start to get really interesting features and control over what you're doing with your terrain. So for example, we could also perhaps blend in, add in some height with a purlin mask and use this to only apply height, additional bobbling and interest in the terrain at those low flat areas in the terrain. So let me show you how I created this mask. So first I went to my slope map and I exported a slope map. So that gives me the slopes of the terrain. Where it's white, these slopes are steeper, and where it's dark, we are flatter. What I could do is also normalize that export and re-export it. So it just gives us a bit of a higher dynamic range, so the slopes are more pronounced and the flats are more pronounced. The next thing I'm going to do is export a height map. So same thing, I'll just export my height map. And you can see that it's not very defined. So what I'll do is I'll normalize that as well. Cool, so now we can see our terrain. Now the next step I'm going to do is export a mask. So the first thing I'm going to put into our mask is our height map. And if I just export that, what we'll be able to see in our mask is just the height map. If I increase the strength of the height map, what's actually happening here is we're grabbing the height map, we're multiplying the values of the height map by 2, and then we're flipping, inverting, and normalizing, or not, as the case may be. So if I run this again, you'll see our wide areas become wider, so they're more pronounced. So what we can see is we've really gotten rid of, or we've masked the high areas so that they're all high, and here are our low areas. And because we're selecting for low, what we'll do now is we'll invert this mask. And now we've got a mask that just selects for the low areas of our terrain. The next thing I'm going to do is we'll add in another mask, in this case our slope map that we created earlier. Let's see what happens when we do this. So we're blurring those two masks together. What we're doing is we're assigning the values from mask 2 if they're greater than the values from mask 1. Now this is not that useful to us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert, well, first of all I'm going to multiply them. So now we see the slopey areas within our overall masked out area from before, but I want the flat areas, so I'm going to invert that mask. Now what I've got is a nice mask where flat areas that are relatively low on the terrain have been nicely masked out. Okay, now that we've got this mask, we can use just the mask itself, or rather than using that mask, we can generate the mask every single time we run an operation. So that's what we're going to do here. Those settings are still there, so if I multiply the terrain by a relatively small value, what we should see is this masked area of the terrain should drop its height. And it has. And watch the high parts which are being masked out, which are essentially being removed from the operation. See that the high parts stay high. This is a very powerful benefit of using masking. Now what I want to do now is actually further enhance this mask. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a copy of our mask. So now I've got a new one. Call it low flat. Now what I want to do is add some noise to the terrain where it's low and where it's flat. So I'm going to drag this low flat mask in here. Just set that its strength to 1. We won't invert it because it's already correct. And I'm going to add a noise map. So let's grab a Perlin noise that I created earlier, which is fairly granular. We use its strength as 1. We won't invert it because we don't need to. We're going to multiply this by our original mask to get our new mask. So let's see what happens when we do this. So now you can see the mask is being further masked by the Perlin noise. So let's go and apply this to the terrain. So we do say an add, and we'll add, let's say 10 meters. Now this will generate that mask on the fly again, so that's okay. We don't need to actually export to use the exported mask. And let's just perform this operation. So it's quite subtle, but that's the sort of effect I was going for. Now you've got these subtle undulations in the terrain, which are based on that Perlin noise that we didn't have before. And as you go lower, those undulations become more pronounced. So hit back, add a few more times, and you can see that Perlin noise starting to come through. Okay, so that's an example of using masks to create masks, and then using different sorts of techniques to apply those masks. Just for a bit of fun, let's use the quantize filter on this mask. Quantize, 50 meters, apply. So what we've got happening now is our quantize filter is only being applied at full strength where you've got a white part of this mask, a full strength part of the mask. So we're essentially partially quantizing at the lower levels in the terrain. Let's step back and maybe take it down to 20 meters, because then we should be able to see some more terraces. There we go. So you can see the mask coming in here and the mask coming in here. Cool. So let's smooth these off by applying another operation, and we'll use the masking to do that as well. So let's apply perhaps a feature shrinking filter and see what that does. Cool. So now we've just done a slight smooth. Let's apply perhaps some thermal erosion. If you want to do a smooth, just one iteration is good enough usually. We can leave the mask there, and changing this value to 0.001 means that we pick up more of the terrain. So let's say go over here and run this. So there you can see we're eroding the terrain, but we're using a mask to control where we're eroding the terrain. Okay, thanks for watching.